Alright, we are live. So now, let's see. People should have comments. Okay. Alright, let's see. So now, we should be able to see. Okay, let's see if we have comments. So we're gonna see the comments here. Let's see if there's viewers now. Good morning, everyone. We still have a few more minutes, and then we're gonna start. Okay, let's see. There's comments here.
This is your turn.
Can you see the comments? Yes,
Oh,
we
yeah.
can see the comments. All right. So can you hear us all right? Seems like yeah. Yes, I think they can see us. So
Good.
good. Good. So let's give 3 more minutes so that more people can join. So we're excited to be here. So Alberto and I, we're gonna be having a conversation with you about vegetable breeding. One of our colleagues is not here today because he has to travel down south to look at hot pepper trials. But I was able to take some tips from him. So if you have any questions around hot peppers, we'll try to answer them for him. So that's good. Okay. So we are located here in Woodland, California. We're the vegetable center for North America. We have other vegetable centers. One of them is in Netherlands, and here in North America, our vegetable in the center is in Woodland, California. If anyone can type their location in that comment box, that would be so that we will know where everyone is coming from. That would be highly appreciated. So that's good. So let's see the comments, Alberto. Good. So
It is a little hot in here, but actually this morning it rained for the first time in like 8 months. Actually, I think we had forgotten what rain looked like. So it was a really pleasant surprise. It was really beautiful weather with like clouds and sun and everything wonderful. So it's a great day to be in California today, at least in this area. Yes.
that's good. All right. I think let's start. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are from Bayer, specifically the vegetable unit or research of Bayer for vegetables. Today we're gonna have a conversation. We call it taco about salsa, and it's just so happened that two of us, Alberto and I, are breeding for some of the components of salsa. I'm Franco. I breed I breed onions, and Alberto breed tomatoes. So before we go on and introduce ourselves formally, just would like to say that if you type your comments in there, there's going to be a chance that a winner there's gonna be a winner of a goodie bag, a salsa theme goodie bag that will come from the organizer of this event. We're gonna be discussing around what we do here at Bayer, specifically about breeding vegetables. And if you have any questions regarding how we develop vegetables, please type it in the box, and we'll try to answer them as soon as we see them. So for that, I'd like to introduce Alberto. Alberto is our tomato breeder. So Alberto, why don't you introduce yourself? So, yeah.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alberto. First of all, thank you very much for joining in. It is really awesome for us to be able to talk about what we do, because we're really passionate about science and about vegetable breeding. So it's great to see other people share some of the interest, and obviously how that relates to some of the delicious foodstuffs that we produce. I'm originally from Mexico City. My dad and my family in general kind of were avocado merchants in the city. My dad actually still is an avocado merchant, so if you're seeing that, hi. But yeah, so I've always had that little bit of contact with agriculture through my family business. My dad would go with growers and buy avocados and then take them to the city and sell them in the market. I kind of did a really interesting path to come into plant breeding. And it kind of represents a little bit about the diversity on the field. So my undergrad I did in bioinformatics. I was trained as a programmer, a statistician, and really molecular biology, evolutionary biology. And I really came to plant breeding through actually archaeology. We were looking at, I did an internship at the University of Copenhagen, where we were looking at archaeological remains, trying to get DNA from samples and reconstruct evolution. And one of the research projects I was involved in was the domestication of maize. And really that's where you see kind of how our history ties back way deep into the history of humanity, and we're really, really closely aligned to our foodstuffs, our crops. So after that, I did my PhD at Cornell, working with maize land races, so traditional varieties from Latin America, spanning Mexico all the way down to Argentina. It was thousands of varieties. And then I did a postdoc with Mars Incorporated, where I worked with cocoa breeding, the chocolate tree. And that's really where I got to see a little bit about how, flavor and all the important characteristics from a consumer perspective are really, really fundamental for how we think about the future of plant breeding. I've been in Bayer since last year, and as a tomato breeder, I'm really excited to be able to contribute to the profitability and really the success of our growers, but also for consumers, to give people foodstuffs that are grown more sustainably, things that are more delicious and more nutritious. So I'm really happy that you joined, and it was for me a really interesting path, starting from programming to plant breeding, but I'm really happy that I'm here, and I'm really happy that I can have this conversation with you all. And so Franco, how did you end up in plant breeding?
Thanks. First of all, thanks Alberto for that really great story of yours on how did you get into to plant breeding. I mean, it's really amazing that to hear that journey, because I think probably this is one of those events that I get to know people too, right? So because of this pandemic, we are even us here in Bayer Crop Science are not going to the office a lot of times, so it's probably the first time that I see Alberto in months, so that's good to see. So now to answer your question, Alberto, about how did I get into plant breeding, it's really so I grew up in the Philippines, and then my parents are actually rice farmers, but growing up I was also exposed to vegetables. Well, of course most of it are tropical vegetables. And then I started I got interested in plant breeding really early on in back when I was in undergraduate, because we're close to these research universities. And then that's what I did in my master's. I did plant breeding. And then I got the opportunity to study at Iowa State University, so I did my PhD in plant breeding in the Midwest. But I did oat. I studied the beta glucan component in oats, which is one of those compounds that are really healthy and in oats. And then after that, I started working for Bayer as a corn breeder and a field corn breeder. And then 7 years ago, I got the opportunity to move to vegetables in 2015, and that's how I got started in onion breeding. And that's really and after that, I think I fell in love with this crop because I get to meet a lot of customers during during field days, visiting fields, and I get to know what I get to involved in some industry events as well. So which is good because during those industry events we can get to meet some of the representatives from the consumer and what they want, and then we put that into our how we think about breeding. So yeah, that's how I started in breeding. Before we go on, let me see if we have questions here at the bottom. So okay, I think this is a question for you, Alberto. Where did tomatoes originate, and when were they first domesticated as a food crop?
That's a really great question. I think for tomatoes were domesticated definitely in Latin America. The first widespread cultivation definitely and widespread use comes from Mexico, and the word tomato comes from a native word in Mexico. We have other type of tomato. We call it tomatillo. Sometimes people think it's the same species, but actually they're very different species. And yeah, so the wild ancestors are more common in South America. So we believe that the center of origin of the species and the genus is in South America, and then people through subsequent selection kind of started using more and more tomato, and it eventually went into Mexico, and then we have a lot more widespread use and diversity, and eventually that's how it came into contact with the wider world through the contact with the old world and the new world back in 1500s. But yeah, great question, and honestly, it's something that we're constantly investigating. The history of domestication is honestly a very complex one because we rely on archaeological evidence, and I don't know if any one of you has seen tomato seeds, but they're tiny. So in the case of corn, it leaves a little bit more remains. Also, we need to see a little bit of depictions in pottery, and as I said, in the case of fruits, it's really hard to know what fruit it is when you see it in a pottery or a painting or something. It's a globular fruit, but we don't know which one it is, if it's a tomato or tomatillo. So that's an active area of research, and honestly, one that I'm really interested in. So thank you for the question.
Good. Hey, before we go on with a lot of science, Alberto, can you please share to us what's your favorite recipe of a salsa?
Right. Okay, yes. So for salsa, as I said, I'm kind of from Mexico, and the way we do salsa in Mexico is kind of there is a large diversity of salsas, very large. And in fact, some of us will prefer specific restaurants based on their salsa. People will say, "Oh, this restaurant, the food is good, but their salsa is incredible," and people will go specifically for that. Now, kind of the first recipe I learned from my mom is kind of more like a base, something that you use for creating a paste that then you use to impart flavor onto other dishes. And this is a very simple recipe, and that's where I got started. So generally, you use about 10 to 13 serrano chiles. They're a little bit shorter, a little bit elongated. Then we use 7 tomatoes. In Mexico, the most common tomato that you'll find is the Roma tomato, or also called saladet. So we generally use 7 of those, medium size, and it's very simple. You kind of just boil it first. Cook the chili. The serrano chili, then add the tomatoes, and once the tomatoes kind of the skin breaks, essentially you just use a food processor or a blender, or if you really want to go old school, you can use a little bit of a mortar, and that's your base. And then you can use it in many dishes. You can add, some other flavors to it if you want it a little bit sweeter, a little bit more spicy, but really that becomes a base to kind of explore a little bit more other recipes. What about you, Franco? How do you make your salsa?
Well, that's really interesting, Alberto, because when you mentioned Serrano, wow, I said, wow, that's a higher higher scoville units than what I use, which is just jalapeno. So it's almost like the same thing, right? I mean, I learned this from one of our colleagues here in Woodland. I have just 8 Roma tomatoes, and then depending on your tolerance to spicy food, usually I put 3 to 4 jalapenos, and then of course 1 big onions, right? So that's really important for me. Getting those onions in that salsa is really important, and of course you get the cilantro in there to add, of course, add flavor into that. I like ever since I moved to California, salsa is always part of that, and then tying it back to our discussion. People will ask me a lot of times, okay, what's the best onion to be used for a salsa? My crew here, my friends here, would always tell me, oh, you can use anything, right? But but the friends that I have from Mexico will always tell me, maybe you should change, the onion. Maybe try white onions, because they said, oh, it's a little bit tangy, the flavor, and a little bit strong. So I think, and I agree, but I think for me, I mean, it depends on the people what they would like to do. Yellow onions, I like that for cooking, for cooking, and then red onions for salads. That's what we do here, and to talk more about the science or the onion breeding. So here in Bayer Vegetables, we actually breed for red, yellow, and white onions, and there's a few of us, a few onion breeders in the United States, but specifically I do those onions that are planted in the fall right now, and then or planted in the fall or planted in the winter and harvested during spring and in summer. Those are what we call the short day onions, and then the intermediate onions. So we have another breeder in the northern area of the United States, and he does the breeding for what we call the long day onions. These are the onions planted during spring, harvested in the fall right now. So yeah. So let's
see if there's another question in the comments.
Okay.
Oh, someone loves black beans in their salsa. Really good.
Yeah.
Some protein in there. It's always good to include that. Do you breed onions that won't make us cry when we cut them? Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Do you not won't make us? Oh yeah, that's really interesting. One of the questions here, and I like to repeat that: do you breed onions that won't make us cry when we cut into them? So let me start with why we cry, right? When we're cutting onions, I think a lot of people knows about, but I just would like to repeat that. Due to these sulfuric compounds that are released when you cut the onions, so released into the air, and of course, as a natural reaction, when your eyes is irritated, they produce, you produce tears, right? That is the simple explanation into that. And of course, there's chemical reaction that happens in that process. And to answer your question, yes, we do breed for that to lower what we call pungency. It's measured in the lab. The compound that we measure is pyruvate, and we try to reduce the pyruvate in some of our onions, and most of those actually we would like to do that for yellow and red, because in the red, those are for salad, right? You want to reduce that strong flavor, but not to the point that you cannot taste the onion anymore. That's really important. If you look at, say, the standards for, say, mild onion in some parts of United States, like in Georgia, they have these standards on what should be a mild onion for that matter. So it's good. Good.
So one question is, what characteristics do you look for when breeding onions and tomatoes?
How about you start first with tomatoes?
Okay, so I'll start with tomatoes. And that's a really interesting question because it's a very diverse question. I think if any of you go to a supermarket today, you'll find that within the aisle or the produce section, the tomato section is quite diverse. So you'll find your cherries, you'll find your like rounds, your beef steaks, your saladettes. Obviously, you'll also find your heirloom types. So there's a lot of different types of tomato, and in fact, what you breed depends on who's going to grow them and who's going to eat them. And there's a lot of relationship between obviously what people eat, their preferences influences what growers grow. I as a breeder right now, I have a global market, so some of my markets people prefer, let's say, small fruit, red, relatively relatively homogeneous. So it's a very spherical fruit with very specific 170 grams to 160, 180. So that's one thing people prefer. Some other markets people want, the truly big beef steaks, 250 grams. They kind of like to see a little bit of the ribs that you can see at the top of the tomato. Some places people like pink tomatoes. Some places people like a little bit more bright red. Some people like a very shiny fruit. Generally, we also breed for just the type of plant and the resistances that the growers need. So growers will have specific management practices, and we're trying to increase their sustainability by giving them natural disease resistance through traditional breeding, and just you have your resistant mom and your essentially your new varieties will have that resistance. So we try to put that out as well in the commercial varieties so that people have an easier time growing them. Obviously flavor. When we have these trials, I do end up eating a lot of tomato. There's only so much one can eat, but we definitely do keep a little bit of taps into different components of flavor. And also I specifically have a type of tomato called the home garden type here in the US, where you may be familiar with some of our varieties. My favorite one is Lemon Boy. You may have seen it, you may have grown it as well yourselves. It's a fruit that is kind of yellow, a little bit orangey, very juicy and very sweet, incredibly flavorful. So those are the types that we also like to breed for, and there's a little bit more diversity there. So another trait is earliness. People want their tomatoes very quickly in the season, so we try to make sure that for home gardeners as well as growers, we keep in mind when people expect to have their first harvest and how long they want to have harvest for. So it's a lot of things that we want to put, but essentially we want to make people happy through very healthy veggies. And I see that we have the same question for Franco. So what about you? What about onions?
That's really I didn't realize about that tomatoes. That's so many diversity just to cater the global needs. For us here in Bayer, there's so many vegetable breeders in Bayer, and we almost like cater for what everyone's needs. That's as a global company, we breed for those type of tomatoes that are grown in the greenhouses. We breed for tomatoes also that's grown in open field, right? And
right.
like that. And for onions, we actually, most of the onions, of course, are bred in are planted in open field. And before I go on, Alberto, we also, I like to mention also that I breed for bunching onion. Those green onions that are planted in northern Mexico, in Mexicali area. We breed those too. We sell a lot of bunching onions there. And to answer one of the question about what are actually the goals of our onion breeding programs, we like to look at select for shape. We would like to have for every, just like what you said, Alberto. Some countries they prefer flat. Some regions in other countries they prefer flat. Some would like to have round. The round onions, the reasoning for that is because, at least for the grower, it's actually higher, as you get more weight, if you have a rounder onion. And most of the time people like the round onion. And most of the things that I do is more about yellow onions, color-wise. So our programs here, we invest more in the yellow onions because that's the one that's really commonly eaten. And then I'm gonna show you here something like what we also breed for single center. Single center is like one of those traits that probably we don't see a lot in consumer, because when we cut onions we don't really look whether it's a single center or not. But for processing onions, like if you want, say, what we call the ringing market, the onion rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we breed for what we call single center onions. So I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but you see in here that is a single center onion. There's only one growing point in there. So that's it. And then what we call a multiple center, there is what we call multiple growing points. So for an onion processor, you're gonna have less onion rings here, right? It just so happened this is red, but there's gonna be also some yellows that are what they call multiple centers. So if you are one of those companies that are doing a lot of onion rings, or even at home, like when you cut an onion, you want to have more onion rings if you're gonna be doing onion rings. So that's for us. And for some of the grower traits, of course we would like disease resistance. We bring disease resistance so that you get a better onions at the end, for the grower. At the same time, someone mentioned about pungency. Yes, we select for pungency. We have a laboratory process for that. And Alberto mentioned about tasting onions while in the field. I've done that. I do that all the time. So, but I look at our records. Okay, which one of the set has I selected for lower pungency. So I'm gonna go in there, and if there's a customer with me, I pass the onions just like melon, right, like that. So before I go on, Alberto, I like to just mention what we do in hot pepper, because that's really an important component of salsa. So the breeder who cannot join us today mentioned to me that for jalapeno as a component of salsa, they breed for shape and size. They want what we call this bullet shape, not pointy, the jalapeno. And for a customer, I think you do not want cracking. You do not want to see cracking in there. So in our jalapeno, that's why we breed against that. And of course, pungency. We select for pungency, depending. Say, for example, jalapeno have a certain limit for
Heat units.
Heat units, the Scoville heat units for jalapeno. So we would like to stay on that heat unit. So
also, just to add on that, jalapeno also has that difference, right? Some of them are processing, and some of them are essentially fresh market. Same with tomato. We have processing tomato, that is normally what you see in like tomato paste, tomato sauce, and fresh market tomato, which is normally what you buy in the produce section of the supermarket. So we do have breeding programs for those as well, and the same in hot pepper.
Yeah, I think there's a question for you here.
Homemade is the best using of tomatoes. Yes. I know that tomatoes in the field are subject to a lot of disease, insect pressure, and also affected by rain. What are the major pressures for onions? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, so it's almost like the same thing that for a grower, there's a lot of disease in onion fields, like what we call pink root disease. That disease actually makes the onion, if it's a susceptible one, susceptible variety, you will not be able to see onions at the end. So it's really you will just see the leaves, but there's no bulb. So it's really a big this is for, and luckily for us in bare vegetables, we are breeding against that. So our newer varieties are resistant to what we call pink root. And another disease that we look at is sarin basal rot. So this one is really also a bad disease for onions. And then mention about insect pressure. It's mostly, some of them are common insects you can find in the fields. But one thing really that's really important is the what we call the iris yellow spot virus. That's really bad in onions, because it attack the leaves like that. And there's a vector for that, the thrips, for onions. So okay,
let's see if there were more comments about
let's see.
Oh, someone is from San
All right, let's see if we missed anything here. Okay,
The issue around flavor is difficult. Many people say that supermarket tomatoes don't have any taste. How can you help with that? That's a great question, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say even like that's a very very important subject, and it's a very very important one for me, particularly as a tomato breeder. And my commitment to consumers is to make sure that they have flavorful and nutritious crop that we can all eat. I eat tomato myself. So one of the things that Franco was mentioning that has been a very, very important focus for people globally for a long time has been disease resistance, mainly because for a grower that can be the difference between having some crop, a lot of crop, or no crop. And for tomato, and someone already put that in the comments, tomatoes, they get attacked by a lot of things. They get attacked by insects, by fungi, by viruses, by bacteria. Almost anything and everything attacks tomato. Like the tomato book on diseases is like maybe this big. So it's a very very unique crop in that sense. So we focused a lot on making sure that the grower has those big on the base. Now the flavor, it's really important because we do have a component in our breeding program where we are constantly getting feedback from the consumers and making sure that we're kind of going in the right direction. Again, it depends a lot on the market and what people want and prefer. For example, for the cherry tomatoes will have a very specific flavor profile that tends to be a little bit higher in sugars. That's why it's a very unique flavor. Processing tomato also has a very substantial focus on sugars and specifically color for the fresh, because it's going to become tomato paste and whatnot. For the fresh market, we're definitely trying and doing our best to cater to consumers. So if you're interested, let us know in the comments, and we will definitely reach out to you. We have a component part of our breeding program that we're always reaching out to consumers to tailor it. The truth is the preferences are quite wide and diverse, but we're striving to make everything more nutritious as well.
That's good. Yeah, one comment here on Alberto is about the single center and onion. It's actually because we breed for that single center, and that's actually good for consumers, so that less food waste, and that's really important for us because as for us as company, we are promoting sustainability, and that's big for us. From every facets of breeding process, we always consider sustainability not only in our products but also in our process. And we are close to end here, but before we go into that, I just would like to mention, Alberto, that you see probably you only see me here, me in Alberto in this live event, but there's actually a big team behind us. We have what we call plant pathologists that help us identify those diseases, and in onion help us screen for those diseases so that we have a better variety. We have what we call people working in the lab to help us assess some of these compounds in our vegetables. We also have what we call data scientists helping us a lot with crunching numbers, looking at insights on the data, not only from what we call the breeding data, but also on the consumer data as well, so that we can have insights on what could be the future, right? And then we have what we call the discovery scientists, who are also looking at what are possible say traits that might be existing in our relatives of tomato that we can bring to add disease resistance. So that's there's a team behind us. So we always thankful for the support of those people working with us.
Absolutely, and actually that ties into one of the questions in the comments, which is whether heritage breeds or wild species are used today in breeding for tomato and onion. I can say for tomato, absolutely, and in fact, that's something that we regularly use because they're a really good source for disease resistance and for diversity in general. I definitely think that diversity is important in breeding programs. So we use heritage breeds and wild species. What about onion?
Well, the interesting thing about onion, Alberto, is that onion was domesticated long time ago, right? It's like you'll see it. There's almost like in in civilization, in the history of civilization, there's always something mentioned about onions that are written in those, in the caves, something like that. There's not much what we can see from what we call wild relatives of onion. There's nothing like that. But we use what we call the other onion species, to bring resistance to some disease. It's just a long process, but we use all of those what we call germplasm resources, so that we can breed better onions. As I think I mentioned to you earlier, that it takes almost like 16 years to come up with a new variety of onion. And how long does it take for you to come up with a new tomato variety?
I can tell you, yes. So I think the industry standard, when you look at how often a new variety comes online, is probably around 8 to 10 years.
Wow.
From beginning to end.
Yeah.
We want a new variety to we put it on sale. So that would be the industry average probably. What about onion?
Yeah, 16 years. So that's why the consumer feedback is really important.
How many?
16.
16.
Yeah, 16.
1-6.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
it really takes a while. And I think what the good thing is that luckily as a company, Bayer is really supportive in changing the way we do breeding, so that we can shorten the cycle, so that if there's a new a product concept, we can react to that. Or at the same time, we are already starting to think what could be needed in the future. And one of them, and I know we are probably over a time a little bit, one of them is because of the labor shortage that's happening right now and in the future. Long time ago, we started breeding for mechanically harvestable onions. That's one of the things that that's going to be hitting the market, so that we improve the economic sustainability of our growers. So that's good. So we are 1 minute over the time here, and let's see if there is one more question, and then we can probably start. You briefly mentioned breeding for nutrition. What does that mean? What nutrient would you be trying to increase?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, I mean, it depends on the species, it depends on the market. But in the case of tomato, a really important component of that is lycopene. Lycopene has a very, very important nutritional value for us.
Yeah.
I know that, again, it has bricks. It has it has a lot of micronutrients, and it depends on the type of tomato which ones we can easily increase. But lycopene is probably the most important one in tomato. We have a little bit of vitamins, but lycopene by far it's kind of a really important one. Also, just in general, eating a lot of veggies is important, not just one.
That's
so
good. Yeah.
As much as I love tomato and I like everyone to eat a lot of tomato, please don't just eat tomato. Eat a rainbow. That's what people say. Make sure that you eat a lot of different vegetables and fruits. But yeah, within each one, we're trying to increase some of those nutrients and macronutrients. What about onion?
So yeah, that's good. We don't actually right now say exactly breed for, hey, we would like to increase this micronutrient in onions, because in onions there's already a lot of micronutrients in there that's really good. Antioxidants specifically, like say in yellow onions, some of the varieties are probably some of the varieties that are in there have higher what they call quercetin component. It's an antioxidant. You can find them in yellow onions, and then of course in the red onions, the anthocyanins. There are of course all of those. The flavonoids. They are good for our health. These antioxidants, because of this anti-cancer properties. So again, like any vegetables is good for our health. So that's really good. So. Okay.
And maybe one thing we can share with people as we wrap up is maybe what a day looks like for us as breeders.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe people are interested in knowing how we do and how we do our job, and how we, as Franco said, it's a big effort with a big team of people, from entomologists, plant pathologists, all the way to data scientists, programmers, and us as breeders. And really, a day in our lives, we are, at least personally myself, I can say for sure that I'm tied to the seasons, right, to the cycles. The cycles of we have to do our sowings, we have to do our transplantings, we have to do our harvest, and we're constantly trying to think, what do people want, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and day to day, we gather the data, we create our experiments so that we can ascertain with certainty, this tomato has better flavor, this tomato has bigger size, this tomato resists diseases better. So we're coming up with these experiments, and we're working with growers. We're working with growers almost all the time. Very often we're working with very, very large teams that work internationally. So one day we'll be talking with someone in Australia, one day we'll be talking with someone in Canada, day we'll be talking with someone in Chile or Argentina. And over there we're working as well with growers who tell us, this particular variety has the right performance or it doesn't, and then we're adjusting our breeding process to make sure that we incorporate all that data and kind of continue the process of selecting the best moms and dads for the next generation. So that's what it looks like, at least in my life. It's like a lot of cycles, a lot of constantly thinking about the next sowing, the next harvest, sowing, harvest, and is that similar for you?
Yes, almost similar to me what I do on Alberto on that that we're driven by cycles. But I think there's one really interesting question here, Alberto, about are you currently using gene editing to assist with breeding either tomatoes or onions? So for us, of course, gene editing is still under regulatory how do you call this, oversight, I think, and in different countries. So we, as a company, we are not. I think there's a press release about that from Bayer. That's something actually for the future, right? We would like to use that. Hopefully, there's no. There's gonna be probably a time in which there's gonna be more clarity about how to do use gene editing. But we have the technical, what we say, knowledge to use gene editing. That's for sure. But right now, none of our crops are using gene editing. So but gene editing is going to be one of those tools, hopefully, in the future. So.
Yeah. And again, it's a very important part. And for those who maybe don't understand what gene editing means, gene editing just means that you kind of look at the genome and say, you see a sequence A, C, T, T, A, and you say, oh, this should be a C because I know that other tomatoes, when they have a C, they have a disease resistance, for example. So it's kind of like the molecular tools to just go in and change that C for a particular tomato. And then that is, normally just a very, very specific change that from other tomatoes that it has a good effect. Again, we have the technical understanding. We're not using it, at least in breeding right now. But it's important to keep these things in mind in the future. For the moment, right now, a lot of using of our existing germplasm and sometimes some of these heirloom types and wild relatives.
Yeah, that's good. There's a question around if you need more information about vegetables by Bayer, you can go to vegetable.bayer.com. So it's a new website because we combined our two brands, Seminis in the Reuter. So if you can go to that website, again, that's vegetable.bayer.com. So or if you just search Bayer, one of those links will direct you to our vegetable. If you wanted to know more about our products or where to buy them, our varieties, you can always see it there. So I think that's all we have for today. And again, thanks a lot for joining us today. We really appreciate this the questions and also the some of the comments. So thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future when we go back to the next normal.
Yes, and again, it's the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables, as Kelly pointed out in the comments. So yeah, eat the rainbow, be healthy, exercise, and enjoy the rain when it rains, enjoy the sun when it's sunny, and yeah, thank you for joining. We're really happy that for the comments and the feedback.
All right.
And also thank you for the organization for setting up this, Build Up Dietitians. Thank you very much, and thank you for Bayer and everyone who works with us in this company, because it's really powerful what we do, and we're really happy to be able to provide better things every year and make the world a better place through fruits and veggies.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks a lot, everyone. All right, bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.